Well, we've been looking at the effects of different amounts of inequality in different rich developed societies. Measuring inequality simply by the size of the income gap between rich and poor in each country. We also looked at the same question amongst the 50 American states as a sort of different separate test bed. And what we found is really quite extraordinary. Almost every social problem is worse in the more unequal countries. So, for instance, there's more violence as measured by homicide rates, many more teenage births, mental health is much worse, the proportion of the population in prison much higher, measures of child well-being much poorer in more unequal countries. So it looks as if almost all the problems that we think of as having these social gradients being more common at the bottom of the social ladder get worse in countries with bigger income differences. And basically that's saying they're worse in countries like the United States or Britain or Portugal, those are the more unequal of the rich developed countries, and better in the Nordic countries and Japan, countries like that. But really all the countries spanning out, the level of inequality closely related to the scale of all these problems. And also health seems to be worse as measured by life expectancy or infant mortality, things like that. One of the really striking things is that these problems are not just a little bit worse. I'm not talking about, say, 25 or 30% worse. I'm talking about problems being, well, mental illness 3 times as common in more unequal of the rich market democracies, but homicide rates may be 6 times as high. The proportion of the population in prison or teenage birth rates 8 or even 10 times as high. Really huge differences. And that is partly because it's not just the poor who seem to be affected by inequality. The differences are so big because we're all affected. The vast majority of the population seems to do worse in a more unequal country. And so when one's talking about well-being in populations, it looks to us as if inequality has a very damaging effect on levels of well-being. And of course most of these measures I've been talking about are pretty hard measures, like life expectancy or homicide or the proportion of the population in prison. They're not soft measures to do with judgments and subjective viewpoints. And it looks to us increasingly as if if we're going to improve the quality of life, the real quality of life for human beings in the rich world, what we have to do is stop thinking about higher material standards. That no longer seems to be related to measures of well-being or happiness or health, for instance, but turn our attention to the quality of the social environment. And it looks to us as if a really important determinant of the quality of the social environment is the scale of income differences. It's almost as if the scale of income differences gave us a handle on the psychosocial well-being of whole populations. It's really quite an exciting picture.